Hey guys, welcome to my space between spaces. Tonight we talk about guiding. This is a simulator. I've got it hooked up inside the house here, and as you can see, it's just a simulator. You can put your profiles in here. So we're going to keep it pretty basic. I'm going to go over some things I look for. You'll notice I have this guide stats box here, and you can put these boxes wherever you want them. You can rearrange them. And you can rearrange how this looks. Gosh, I'm guiding good. Whoa, we're out of control. See, so I like it here. I like to see this 1 second line. I love to see the 1 second line. That is important to me. And, then we can have it to where, you see a lot of folks, they'll run like this, or this is what you see a lot of. And, look how smooth everything is. Yeah, well, okay. So it's not smooth anymore. The truth of it is really, you need to set it to where you can actually see what's going on, but without giving you so much information that it's overwhelming. At the same time, as we go through this, I'll kind of tell you to ignore this guide graph on more than one occasion. And what we're going to look at is these numbers right here. This is your total RMS error. So if you went to CCD calculator and you put in your main imaging scope's focal length and your main camera's pixel size, it would shoot you out a number in arc seconds per pixel resolution. That is your hard number. You've got to get under that number. And if you can't, you're never going to get round stars. If you do get round stars, that means you have elongated in every direction, and you now have bloated stars. They are round, but they are bloated. Okay, so these numbers are very important. The other part, this guide stats, and you have to actually enable this. It's under guide display stats. That's what it is. I like to look at peak to peak because these numbers are so important, and I wish they would just bake them right into where you could see them, where you don't have to put them up, because so many people fail to look at their peak to peak. This is going to play a major role in what we do going forward. This bullseye is kind of nice. The star profile, we're going to go through that, and the brain tab here together, and how to set some of these parameters. So let's get started here. You can run noise reduction if you want, but I actually prefer for you to do darks, dark library, build one, a bad pixel map. Take some calibration frames for your guide scope. They come in handy. They work very well. It doesn't take very long to do them. All the default stuff here is pretty good. A lot of this gets auto-populated, and ASI 120mm would be this, I believe, and crank your gain up pretty good. Using subframes for some older cameras, they didn't actually do capture mode. They would only do a certain mode of transfer. So what they would do is you would actually run like video, and it would take like 6 or 8 frames and then stack them, and that would be your 1 second exposure or whatever. So some of the old Nex image, some of those not good guide cameras. Guiding. Search region pixels. So it's gonna it's gonna search some region around where it was for the guide star. Sometimes I'll jack that up a little. Your minimum star half flux diameter in pixels, we're going to get that number from this spike right here. When we start guiding on a star and we kind of get familiar with what our star's half flux diameters are, you can set a minimum here, and when you auto select a star, it won't select one that's too dim to stay on. And you can also help it where it's not going to pick a saturated star, and it's not going to stick on one that's too dim for you to guide on. So you can kind of help it out. It'll automatically make this star button down here find a star more appropriate for your best guiding. So the focal length of this synthetic scope is 250 millimeters. If you don't move your guide camera from your guide scope, then you can turn this on, assuming that you leave your entire imaging train pretty much together. Otherwise, you have to uncheck that, and you will recalibrate each session. I don't ever remove my guide camera from its guide scope. My stuff all stays the exact same way. I actually mark my stuff. If I do have to take it apart, I actually mark it and put it back, I mean, exactly as close as I possibly can. Especially if you get things working really good, because once you get something working really good, you really don't want to go changing it. AVXs, I've noticed that pretty much none of them are orthogonal to RA. There's always some error. I believe that's a budget-oriented mount, and there's probably a more scientific explanation, but I'm going to call it it's a cheap mount, and sometimes getting through deck calibration, checking this can help you. Okay. You shouldn't have to do this in modern days. It used to. Fast recenter after calibration or dither should be checked, and enable mount output. If you disable this, it will literally not guide. So, okay, algorithms. For an AVX, predictive PEC reigns supreme. And you would think that you would want to set this to 600 seconds because that's the worm period. But I'll tell you, you would think wrong. It does work that way, and it does work pretty well, but it actually will work better if you do a PEC run, if you train your periodic error via either the hand controller or a program called PEC TOOL and insert it into the hand controller. You upload your PEC curve into the hand controller and let it take care of the 600 second long, slow periodic error, and let PhD2 work on the shorter ends, because inside of each one of those motors is a gearbox. So there's a gear at 7 seconds, and I think there's one at 11 and at 30, and anyway, each set of these gears have their own periodic error potential. And by setting this to whatever the default is usually pretty good. Yeah, 200. By leaving that kind of where it's at, it can actually help with a wobbly gear inside of one of those gearboxes. It can help a whole bunch of other stuff, especially when ran in tandem with an uploaded PEC curve to the hand control. They will both work together, and they will work together good. Okay. Declination, resist switch. The AVX has deck backlash. If you try to adjust the worm too tight, it's bad. If you leave it too loose, it's bad. There's no spring load on any of these worms, which when I do a build video, I can show you how to kind of get around some of that, but it's not a true spring-loaded worm. It's just kind of a quasi cushioned worm, so to speak. So resist switch. Aggressiveness, almost every AVX I've seen is going to be jacked up high, and then you're just going to control how much leeway you give it with this number, which actually is right here, up here. So backlash compensation. So there's a couple things that can help you get through calibration if you're having a hard time with calibrating. Backlash compensation, if you get through calibration one time and you run the entire guiding assistant, you can make sure that box is checked, measure your declination backlash, and it takes a little while. And once you start this, you can actually, for instance, if I go E up and then and then yeah, it's going to carry on with guiding. Let me just start this. Oh, measuring, and I just hit stop. So it's gonna force you to wait 2 minutes. So it's going to wait 2 minutes, which I'll just cancel that, and it'll spit out some numbers here. It's going to give you a exposures to use, and then it's going to give you the minmo for both axes and aggression settings and things like that. So it's going to try to help you dial in as best as PhD can how to guide your mount. Now, there's two branches of thought here, and I'm going to go into them. You'll notice I'm guiding at 0.5 seconds here. And this is considered a no-no. If you read and follow the PhD 2 guiding, tech help and go through the manual and online forums, they'll tell you that the Holy Religious Script says that you should never expose below 1 second for any reason whatsoever, because you're just chasing the scene. And I'm just going to stop you right there, because MetaGuide's been out for almost 20 years now, and they've been guiding at 10 frames a second, okay, and doing a good job with full width half maximums to prove it. PhD 2's creators do not use AVX mounts. Let that sink in for a minute. Okay, MetaGuide's creator does use budget-oriented mounts. Believe it or not, a CGE Pro was his mount for a very long time. And it was so genius, because all the information you actually get from the program while you're guiding, it actually tells you what your mount's doing in real time. And you can sit there and watch the star wiggle from the scene. But what I'm going to show you is two ways to guide your mount. One of them is the accepted correct way. Let's go with a 2-second exposure, and let's go over these numbers. So at a half second on both axes and a total RMS of 0.76, and this is probably going to start coming down, that's pretty good guiding. This is an ideal simulator in ideal conditions, and I believe this is a almost perfect mount. I believe they have pulled this from something that is very well calibrated and was doing very, very good. Yeah, that's almost that's almost a perfect cross right there. Your AVX probably does not look like this. My Sim 120 does not look like this. It's close, but it doesn't look like this either. So ideally, what happens here is you have a total RMS number that is below your sampling rate, and you can get that from CCD calculator, and put in your focal length and your camera pixel size from your main scope and get that. But where people run into trouble on an AVX is what happens is one of these two, RA or DEC, will be higher than the other. So what happens is RA, let's say RA is twice DEC, okay? What happens is over here, which nobody ever actually has pulled up hardly, your peak to peak in RA is also higher, and you've noticed these spikies once in a while that really go up towards the 2-second mark, or maybe even the 3-second mark. But your RMS is low, it's below your image scale, but you can't figure out why you're getting elongated stars. Well, it's because of this number. If you're making too many excursions out past your image scale, okay, if you're making too many excursions, let's say your image scale is 1 second. Let's say you have an ASI 1600 and you're on a 750 millimeter scope, and that's around 1 second, okay? If you plug that in, it's around 1 second. So we can get by with this peak to peak being higher than that 1 second, okay? We just can't have it a whole gob ton higher. We can't have it a whole bunch higher, and we can't have a whole bunch of excursions from one axis. The reason why is that'll create a slanted star, and whichever direction it's slanted, I can almost tell which axis that actually was happening in, especially if I know which direction of the sky you're pointed or how things are oriented. So that's where people get into trouble. The RA axis is double the DEC. That's the most common thing. Once they get declined out, the RA axis is almost always the troublesome one in the end. And there's only one way to cure that, and that's to come down and do shorter guide exposures. And this is where we leave off of traditional guiding, and we start the dark art of guiding. Now, what allows this to work now, and you can see right now, oh no, you know. What allows this to work nowadays? Why didn't this work 5 years ago for PhD 2? Why didn't this work 10 years ago? I'll tell you why. The reason why is your computer is a way lot faster. If you are running an ASIR, this will not work. If you're running a StellarMate with a Pi, this will not work. We've tried it in several. I've gone through all the settings as much as I could. The problem is this thing has to take an exposure, send it to the, it has to calculate where it needs to move in here, and then it has to send those corrections to the mount. And it has to do it very quickly. And you need some processing power for that. Well, guess what? Little Ryzen laptops are pretty cheap. And even the little quad-core Atom processors, they're pretty snappy if you don't have a bunch of other stuff running. You can actually notice my friend does this all the time. He'll be guiding along, and his guiding will kind of just straight go down the tubes. Because he'll be playing on PIC's Insight down here in his toolbar. He's got a bunch of other stuff going. And then he turns all that stuff off, and all of a sudden his guiding goes back. It's good. So we know that this is very processor related. We have narrowed it down to times have changed. And the old siren song of not chasing the scene is a myth, was always a myth, and will always be a myth. If you're driving down a highway with a motorcycle and you can blink your eyes open every 2 seconds, you got a curvy road you're driving down, okay? And there's a curve, and there's a curve, and there's curves all over the place. Just blink your eyes open every 2 seconds. And you see how that works for you. Versus what I guide at, which is actually generally 0.2 seconds. That's what I actually guide at. There's a lot more information coming in here. And guess what? Just because the scene is there doesn't mean we have to chase it. My peak to peaks really haven't changed that much. Everything's similar. I'm probably actually seeing what the actual scene's doing. So where's the problem? I always tell people, you watch this number, your oscillation. See this 0.5? 0.55, that's a little too high. When you get over 0.5 using the fast exposure method, you need to back off the aggression a little. There's two options here. One, we can back off the aggression, or we can increase the minmo. Let's start by increasing the minmo because that's very low. Let's just go to 0.10. And then I click somewhere else just to let it sink in. And let's see what this does. Because look what we were doing. Correction this way, correction that way, correction that way, correction that way, another correction. Just bam, 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 all the time. And now, we're still hanging out there. And our numbers haven't changed much. So let's go up a little more. So now, what this minmo does is... let me pause this guiding for a minute. What the minmo does, and let's zoom way in here. All right, so this represents, that's probably a little too far. Here's the 1 second line. So if minmo is how many fractional pixels must the star move to trigger a reaction guide correction. So, and we can do a little math here and figure out exactly where, but I've found just experimenting with this number helps. So 0.2 of one whole pixel, 0.2 of one entire pixel, if we were to ignore these arc seconds for a minute, 0.2 pixels, you know, that's going to put us, we know 0.54 seconds is where both of these axes are pegged at, and that is 0.17 pixels. So if I set it to 0.20, yet it's able to maintain this, I think we're going to be good. Same with deck. Deck's got some big excursions going on here. Look at it. It's jumping all over the place. And like I said, this is a simulator. This is an ideal condition, and PhD authors do not subscribe to what I am showing you right here. And I can very much guarantee you that this red line in a real world situation, let me go back out normal, in a real world situation, most oftentimes is actually pretty dang flat. It's always your RA that you're trying to get come down. If you're having deck troubles, back earlier in the video, check some of those things out. Try to get it through calibration. Try to dial in your backlash compensation setting in here by running that guide assistant, and also assume deck orthogonal to RA during calibration. Okay, that'll help. And then RA only for your dither settings. That way you don't really have to move deck. Okay, it's just RA doing the dithering. So let's continue guiding here, and I can about guarantee you that their little deal here is going to make me look bad because it's a simulator, but it's actually not doing too bad. You can see deck had a spike there. But yeah, so 0.20, and you know, we're guiding under that. You know, you don't want to get it so much to where it's actually you don't want to get it so much to where it's just making corrections back and forth, because it's literally just sitting here and bouncing it. So you'll notice this is about to go down here in just a second, because look how many corrections we were making, and then we switched, and look, we're making less corrections. And we also want to look, there it goes, it's going to start going down back below 0.5, and I'm okay with it being there. I'm okay with it being there. Alright, and now from there, since we've set our min-mo, we know we're going here. This is about, if RA was still out of control, but we knew deck was here, we know that the RA's potential can't be too much above this. So you can actually dial this down a little more, but we're not going to. We don't want to push those boundaries. We don't want to chase the scene. We want to corral it. Okay? Look at that. It came right down. And look at where our stuff's at here. It's getting lower. So you'll notice we're making a correction. Let's just look through here. We've got lots of corrections down, and we got a few corrections up. This thing assumes that you have perfect polar alignment. Most people actually don't. I'm thinking at this point, really, there's not too much that I need to do. This is actually about where my AVX hangs out on good nights shooting high overhead. I can shoot anywhere in the sky, but the lower I go towards the horizon, this will tend to move up towards the 1. But if it's above 1, I'm having a terrible night. I probably shouldn't even be imaging. But generally speaking, this is where it lives. Okay? You can see conditions must have synthetically changed or something, because now it's going back to wonky. We've got some worse seeing conditions. I would expect these two numbers to go up a little, but they didn't. So we know that we're just right down at the scene here, whatever they took this from. So, and we're actually lower than what we started with. So can you get much lower than this? If you have a perfect mount, yeah, you actually can. You actually can get lower than this. But with an AVX, you're probably not. So you're never going to chase the scene with an AVX if you follow this line of thinking. What you're going to do is you're going to chase the mount. You may see a butt ton of corrections across this line, but you're not chasing the scene. You're most likely chasing the mount. The mount has high frequency errors in the gearbox, in the backlash, in the slop, in the gears themselves. And I think it's a good mount. You know, I can sit here and talk bad about it, but I got mine for $799, and it's paid itself off many times in fun factor and education and outreach and literally pictures I've sold. So I'm by no means the best imager. I'm more known to be a mount mechanic. So anyway, one thing that can help on troublesome declination axes is jacking this up. Let's say you've got a real bad backlash problem and your mount is going this way and then it stops and it goes this way in deck. Well, what it's doing is it's correcting and it's flopping over to the other side. You need to probably adjust your minmo and bring your aggressiveness. Just keep it at 100, but sometimes you can bring it down to 90 or so, and that last correction won't overshoot it so bad. But typically it's going to stay at 100. This number just means the maximum number of milliseconds, and it tells you right there the maximum time that it can actually send a continuous pulse. That would be pretty bad if you had that. I have seen that before. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments. If you need help, feel free to shoot me a message or something. But try to be specific and try to be try to get to where you've done some of these things and you're still having some troubles. Okay. So now, when does this fast guiding exposure method, when does this dark art of guiding not work? I'll tell you when it don't work. It don't work if you're in an off-axis guider and you need to guide longer to get a star. It don't work if you're in a tremendous amount of light pollution and you have a ton of pavement around you and your seeing actually sucks. And I don't mean like a little bit, I mean like a lot. Your seeing is bad. And then you've got guys with EQ6s guiding at 1 second, and they're all happy that's sitting next to you. They're like, yeah, the guiding's good, atmosphere's awesome. No, the atmosphere sucks. It's not good at all. You're actually seeing the real data. Literally, if you go in here and turn off guiding, just literally, just uncheck that, and now just let the mount go wherever the mount goes. Here, let's just see what it does. Let me go, yeah, there we go. Yeah, just let the mount go wherever the mount goes, And, oh yeah, whatever synthetic mount this is a good mount. And this is under good conditions. There, they're starting to deviate some. But if you go in here and turn off guiding and put it on 0.5 second or 0.2 second exposures, and you see a wah, I mean, these spikes are going up and down. You're not going to be able to fix that. You have to use the long exposure method. You have no choice. Okay? That is when the meta-guide method or short exposure method of guiding does not work. It also won't work very well if you have a system that has a slight amount of flexure. And I'm going to speak specifically to Newtonian users here, because what can happen is let's say you have a very slight amount of mirror flop. Well, if this oscillation starts to get up and gets modulation going, it almost gets a rhythm going. Essentially, your main image, even though all these numbers will be good, you have to back off minmo a little bit more than you want to. And you have to let these numbers drift a little higher than you think. Because if it starts any kind of oscillation with a newt, particularly one that has a little flexure in it, all your numbers will be good, but you will have elongated stars. So I'm just sharing some of my experiences. I don't like really guiding, but I have to. So I've learned to like it. It's like a mini game. It was a challenge. When I started, I just didn't like guiding. I thought, man, I need to get a mount that I can just do unguided stuff. Well, guess what? I have a Sim 120, and I can go unguided with it on some stuff. Short exposures, but really I'm just lying to myself. Because what I'm doing is getting bloated stars, even high-end mounts and stuff. I shouldn't say super high-end. I'm middle mounts, you know, EQ8s, Sim 60s, Sim 70s, all those, Sim 120. You're lying to yourself. If you're not guiding it, you're not doing your picture justice. And I can prove it to you with science. Your full width half maximums will tell me the tale. All right, guys, that's all I'm going to go in through tonight, at least on this subject. If we have any questions, drop them in the comments. Okay? Thanks.